Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on the science of great teaching. We're going to get into how our brains actually learn and how the very best educators use that knowledge to create lessons you just never forget. Seriously, take a second and think about the best teacher you ever had. What was it about them that just worked? I'll bet it wasn't just that they were passionate. There's a real science to it, and today we're going to build the pyramid of great teaching, right from the very foundation, and that starts inside the learner's mind. Okay, so Act 1, inside the learner's mind. You see, before you can even think about teaching effectively, you've got to understand how the brain learns in the first place. And it's not some kind of magic trick, you know? It's actually a really fascinating set of psychological processes that once you get them, you can learn to work with them instead of against them.
It really all boils down to this: memory. At its absolute core, learning is all about recollection. I mean, think about it. You store some information, and then later, you pull it back out when you need it. That simple act, just recalling something from your brain, well, that's the bedrock of all learning.
And here's a really crucial point. Learning is not a passive activity. We aren't just sponges soaking up information, right? We learn by actually doing stuff and seeing what happens next. It's this constant, dynamic loop of action and feedback. You get a little reward for getting it right, or maybe a little nudge to course correct when you get it wrong.
Okay, so we know how the brain processes info. But what makes someone even want to learn in the first place? Where does that drive come from? Well, what's so fascinating here is that our motivation to learn is actually tied directly to our most basic fundamental human needs. The psychologist Abraham Maslow mapped this out perfectly with his famous hierarchy of needs. Just picture a pyramid, okay? You can't even begin to focus on those high-level goals, like, achieving your full potential, if your basic needs at the bottom aren't met. We're talking food, safety, a sense of belonging. A great teacher gets this. They know that a student who's hungry or feels like they don't fit in, well, they just don't have the mental space for algebra. It's not a lack of willpower, it's just how the brain prioritizes things. So, when you put it all together, effective teaching really aims to develop the whole person. It targets 3 totally distinct areas: the head, which is your knowledge, the hand, which are your skills, and the heart, your attitude. And for learning to truly stick, you've got to engage all 3. All right, let's climb to the next level of our pyramid. Act 2, the art of teaching. Now that we have a handle on the learner, it's time to turn our focus to the instructor and the actual craft of teaching. Okay, so this is a subtle point, but it's a really important one. We tend to use the words teacher and instructor like they're the same thing, but they're not. A teacher, they're mostly about giving you knowledge, the head stuff. But an instructor is all about skills, the practical hand stuff. Why does that even matter? Well, think of it this way. If you're going to learn to fly a plane, you need more than a teacher to explain aerodynamics. You need an instructor in the cockpit with you, guiding your hands on the controls. And this is what great instructors are absolute masters at: prioritizing information. They don't just open up a fire hose of facts. No, they're experts at sorting it all out. They know the crucial difference between what you absolutely must know, what you probably should know, and then all the stuff you could know, which is basically just nice to have trivia. So how do you actually build a lesson that imparts a real skill? Well, there's this classic 4-step method that is it's time-tested and it works. First, you get the learner ready and interested. That's preparation. Then you present the new information. And this next part is key: application, where the learner actually practices it. And finally, testing, to see if it all sank in. It's a simple recipe, but man, is it powerful. Of course, the best instructors also have a whole toolkit they can pull from. They know exactly which tool to use for the job. A slide projector can make visual info super clear, a physical model can make something abstract feel real and 3-dimensional, and a simulator, that lets you practice something high stakes, like flying that plane, in a totally safe environment. It's all about making learning a real multisensory experience. And hey, in today's world, all these tools and methods aren't just for a physical classroom anymore, right? This brings us to 2 really big ideas. First, you've got synchronous learning. Just think of this as a live virtual classroom. Everybody's there at the same time, interacting in real time. It's so effective because you get that immediate back and forth, that instant feedback. Then you've got the flip side, asynchronous learning. This is your classic on-your-own-schedule deal, like watching a recorded lecture. Now, the trade-off here is pretty obvious. You get a ton of flexibility, which is awesome, but you lose out on that direct live interaction. Honestly, the real magic for educators today is figuring out how to blend the two. You can use asynchronous stuff for the basics and then save that precious live synchronous time for what really matters. You know, the deep discussions, the hard problem solving, and that one-on-one mentorship.
And that brings us to the very top of our pyramid, Act 3, Beyond the Lesson Plan. This is where it all comes together. We're moving past just individual lessons now and looking at the entire learning ecosystem, the environment, how we measure success, and the instructor's deeper role. So, how do you make sure a test is actually fair and effective? I mean, checking what a student has learned is absolutely critical, but let's be real, not all tests are created equal. A really, really good test has to have 3 key characteristics. For any test to be worth its salt, it has to nail all 3 of these. First, is it valid? Meaning, does it actually measure what it's supposed to measure? Second, is it reliable? If you took it again, would you get consistent results? And third, is it objective? Is the scoring totally free from bias? Look, without these 3 things, a test is just a pop quiz. But with them, it becomes an incredibly powerful tool for learning.
You know, it's funny. We can get so obsessed with the curriculum and the lesson plans that we forget the physical environment itself is a teacher. A safe, organized space does more than just prevent accidents. Good housekeeping, cleanliness, having things in the right place, it sends a message. It promotes discipline, it shows professionalism, and it creates a space where students can actually focus.
And this is where a truly great instructor evolves into something more. They stop being just a person who gives out information and they become a leader. A leader, as the saying goes, is someone who knows the way, goes the way, and shows the way. They don't just tell you how to get there, they walk the path right alongside you. That kind of leadership, well, it requires some strategic thinking. And a tool like the SWOT analysis, it's not just for corporate boardrooms. A great instructor can use this to look at their own teaching. You know, their strengths might be deep expertise, but a weakness could be struggling to explain things simply. An opportunity might be a new online tool, while a threat could be students getting burned out. See, it turns vague good intentions into an actual concrete plan for getting better. Ultimately, a great instructor's job goes way beyond the lesson plan. They often step into the role of a mentor or even a counselor. And a key quality here is just being a good, empathetic listener. Not being judgmental, it's about guiding students and helping them get over not just the academic roadblocks, but sometimes the personal ones too. So what if we started looking at things a little differently? What if we viewed every single conversation, every presentation we give, every explanation as a chance to teach better? Because when it comes down to it, the science of teaching isn't just for classrooms. It's really a blueprint for clearer communication and deeper understanding in every single part of our lives.